I'm dying to know, how much of this is there? Alright, this is two-sided, and it actually, oh my gosh. I didn't think it had stretch, but it does. That's so exciting. But it's like stretched this way, which is kind of odd. But that means if I were to make something out of it and I wanted to, that's just like an unbelievable amount of stretch. I'm impressed. So I'm quite pleased with this quantity of fabric. I am going to make a skirt. There's nothing wrong with this zipper, so I might as well reuse it. For this project, you will need the assorted drafting tools like pen and pencil and rulers and curves, large paper, and a zipper, and fabric, of course. Depending on the thickness and stiffness of your fabric, you may also need interfacing. So this is my own personal skirt sloper that I have drafted to my own measurements. Alright, here's the bag. And so I do have a video in which I draft a skirt sloper, which I will link to this video. And yeah, so if you need to draft your own skirt sloper, go watch that first. And I'm going to get started making the pattern changes to make my brown skirt with the kick pleats. I'm going to start by drawing a long line on my paper. I want my skirt to be about, well, I want it below the knee. So I'm going to add, I think, 5 inches to the bottom of the skirt. So got my handy weights to hold my pattern down. So this line here, this is my center front, and I'm going to trace the pattern as far as the dart. I'm going to draw, well, okay, I don't want to draw like directly through. You know, I need the large ruler for this. See, I don't want to actually cut into or draw on my sloper because I'm going to want to use it again later. So I'm going to draw a line that is parallel to the center front that goes through my dart point, except that I'm going to draw the line down here. And I'm going to make it 5 inches longer than the actual sloper because that's how much longer I wanted the skirt to be. Then I'm going to make this mark here for the dart point, and yes, okay, there's a hole at the point of the dart, so I can just make that dot. And I have marked where the top of the dart is. I'm going to take my pattern away. There's the dot for my dart, the point of the dart. And I'm going to draw a line from this dot to the top of the skirt. And then I'm going to use the longer ruler to complete the line between the dot for the dart, the point of the dart, and the line that I drew below the skirt. The line is completed. Oh, and I'm also going to connect down here. That's the bottom of the skirt. This here, I'm going to take my curve and I'm going to curve it out a little bit. So what's actually going to happen here is I'm going to have princess seams, fitting control seams instead of darts. And down around here-ish, I'm going to draw the extension for the princess. Not the princess, the kick pleat, that's the word. Words, man. Okay, so how far below the point of the dart am I putting these on the front? How far down would I actually want them on my body? I'm actually even wearing a skirt today. Okay, so probably like about here. I don't want them to impede my ability to walk around, you know, but I'm gonna go with 6 inches below the point of the dart. So this is quite obviously gonna be a little bit different in the front and the back, but like, so since this is a symmetrical skirt, it's just gonna, like, the left and right leg are gonna be the same. So I made that mark, and I'm going to draw another line out parallel to this one. How big do I want my kick pleats? To be honest, I'm working with a limited quantity of fabric, so I don't want them to be too big. So my kick pleats are going to be an extension of 3/4 of an inch, which doesn't sound like a lot, but since it's going to be doubled and then doubled again, it's actually going to be an additional 3 inches just on the front of the skirt. And I will connect this hemline as well. And all right, so here we have, can you even see that? Here we have my extension for the kick pleat. So this is going to end up being sewn like that and then pressed so it looks nice. And now I'm going to finish this piece by adding seam allowance to it. Since I will be using the serger, I don't need a ton of seam allowance. Oh, I'm going to make this center front on the fold, so I don't need seam allowance there. I'm going to make that symbol for center front on the fold. And mark this as center front on fold. Okay. So how much hem allowance do I want? How much seam allowance do I want? I'm gonna give myself a full inch of hem allowance. I can always take a little bit off if I run out of fabric. The hem is probably the easiest thing to change. And since I'm using my serger on this, I'm only giving myself a 1/4 inch here. I'm just gonna cut this out before I move on to the next one because that's easier, in my opinion, than having loads of paper just hanging out. side front is a little bit different because we are not going to start by drawing the straight line because there isn't a straight line here. So I'm actually going to start by tracing around the side from the leg of the dart round down the side. I should probably neaten this up with the ruler since part of this is a straight line, but not all of it. Okay, I'm just going to mark here that that's the end dot there. And same parallel line here between the front of the skirt and, parallel line between the dot and the front of the skirt, which I need the larger ruler for. Because I wanted it to be 5 inches longer. And then of course that dot is there. So. Lift that away. You'll see the dot here. Now I'm going to finish that dart leg. And then I'm going to finish the line here. I'm going to extend this. I'm going to make this line a little bit straighter. And then from this straight line, I'm going to square out and meet up with this line over here. Oh, it almost didn't, kind of didn't meet. Now it's done. Okay. And 1 inch hem. I got close to the edge of the paper here, but it's all right because I'm not exceeding it. All right, so here, I'm going to take my curve again and just make that a little bit smoother. Now for the extension. There's a dot. And I'm going to make it 6 inches down. And I'm going to square out 3/4 of an inch. And then draw that parallel line. And there is the side front. Come on, focus. All right, side front. Now I just got to add the seam allowance. I already added the hem allowance. Now I just got to seam allowance it. Fun fact, if you look around my lab in the background of my videos, you will see clues to future videos happening. Just saying. The back is going to be done in an almost identical manner, except so that, as you can see, my back has, come on, okay, focus, yes. My back has 2 darts. I'm going to keep this one as a dart, and I'm going to turn this one into the fitting control seam, and down here the kick pleat. That's the plan, but it's almost identical to the front. So I'll start by drawing the big long line. That is our center back. And I'm going to line this up. I made the front longer, so I must make the back longer. What did I agree on? 5 inches? Alright, so I will draw here up at the top until I get to this dart, which I'll mark where the dart is, and then I'll mark the point of the dart. And draw the line parallel to this line. I'm going to draw the line that is 5 inches there. And take that away. Oh, snap. I'm not done yet. Damn it, I gotta put this back. Ugh. I wanted the side dart, not the one closer to the middle. I wanted the one closer to the side. Sometimes I'm dumb. Like, I just said that's what I'm gonna do, and then I didn't do it. Okay. Finish drawing that dart and go to this dart leg. Okay, draw this dart dot. And parallel that line. Good grief. Okay. Now we ready. Okay, so a dart point. Come on, focus. There's a dot for the dart point, and I'm going to draw these legs here. And I'm going to draw this, just one leg on the further to the side dart, because I'm going to continue this line here. So, to reiterate, we're keeping this dart. We're turning this one into a fitting control seam. And I'm just going to make that a little curvier, make it smoother. And finish out drawing the hem down here. So how much further down than a dart do I want to make the kick pleats in the back? I stuck the ruler to myself and decided on 8 inches. Now I'll add seam allowance on the outside of the kick pleat. And now I have to add seam allowance and hem allowance. Same as the front. Except I'm going to have the center back on the fold, so I don't need seam allowance there. I will make that symbol that means on the fold. Time to do the side back, which is going to be done exactly the same as the side front. So I'm going to mark here, leg of the dart, point of the dart, and drawing a parallel line down here, because I'm extending the skirt, making it longer, blah, 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 blah. Yes. Alright, we're going to draw up here, trace around this area. And I should probably come back in with the ruler and neaten this up a little bit. But it's kind of hard to do that actively tracing it. Got it. Okay. And we're going to extend that. The same amount I extended the other one. Which, by the way, if you find that your skirts often like ride up in the back, and the back ends up higher at the hem than the front, you can make the back longer. No one is stopping you. In fact, I sometimes do that because I think it looks tacky when the back of the skirt is higher than the front. I don't like it. Yeah. I'm gonna draw this line. And alright, from the top of the dart to the point of the dart, draw the leg, which is going to become the fitting control seam. Finish out that line there. Take my curve, smooth it out. This is called truing. And did we agree on 6 inches down? Let me go measure the other one. No, we agreed on 8 inches, didn't we? We agreed on 8 inches. Alright, so 8 inches down from the point of the dart. And that's where my extension is going to come out for my pleat. It's important to label your patterns, otherwise you're going to forget what it is later. And time for some seam allowance. So something that I just am now thinking about is, where am I going to put the zipper? I think that my side seam needs to be wider so that I can accommodate a zipper properly. So I'm going to go back in and fix that on my front pattern, and I'm just going to put it in now on the back. So to do this, I'm going to make the zipper seam, oh, how much bigger does it need to be? 1/2 inch? I think zipper tape is like 3/4, not 3/4, 3/8 of an inch, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, zipper tape is 3/8. So if I made it a 1/2, then it would just extend like 1/8 of an inch past the zipper tape, which would be fine with me. Or I could only make it just 3/8 so that it just lines up with the zipper tape. That's also fine. But I think I like having just a little bit extra hanging out. I'm so weird. But it's okay. You do you, friends. So, to reiterate, I have to go back and fix my side front to add that extra seam allowance to it so that I can accommodate the zipper. Yeah, I don't know if I want to like retrace this or just like tape a piece to the side. I kind of feel like I should retrace this. What is this? Let's get that out of the way. If I don't do this now, I'll probably do this later. I think I'm retracing it because so at some point in the future there may come a time when I don't need a side zipper. Like if I wanted to put, say, a box zipper in the back or something like that. So I'm actually going to keep this no zip pattern piece, but I'm tracing around it and adding the extra seam allowance to it. Box zippers are cool. All right, I should make something with a box zipper soon so that I can show you how to do that. That said, I probably would not do a box zipper if I was just using a plain old boring zipper. Box zippers are for cool zippers, okay? They're not for that thing that I cut out of something else and it's not technically the same color, but I'm using it anyway because they're both dark. Rather than drawing the lines for the seam allowance and hem allowance, I'm just writing what they are. Because it takes less time and it's just as effective. So now I have side front with no zip, side front with zip. So the last step is to draw a waistband. First thing I have to do, actually, is measure the top of my pattern. So with no seam allowance, I'm measuring the top of the pattern. Okay, do not include seam allowance, do not include the dart, because those will be sewn shut. So this piece here is 2 7/8 at the top. So do you see how I'm doing this? Oh, you can't see at all, can you? Because I'm not even on camera. All right, here, I'm gonna do this one just to make sure that you know what I'm talking about. So here at the top, we have 1 7/8 inches, and I'm going to move that 1 7/8 inches line to the other side of the dart, and I'm going to just gently swing my ruler around and see that we have exactly 3 inches. Exactly. That just seems so... Well, you know what? I drew that dart, and I probably just 3 inches from the center back. Cool. All right, so this one, 3 inches at the top. But yeah, so basically I want the waistband to overhang itself a little bit, and then I'll put a button on this one because I got some cool brown buttons, and one of them is gonna go on the skirt, and it's gonna be great. Yeah. So I'm gonna make my waistband longer than the top of the skirt. So if the top of the skirt measured 28 inches, then the waistband should be more than that, plus seam allowance. So let's see, how thick do I want it? I don't need a really big one, maybe 1.5 inches. Folded over would be 3, plus the seam allowance of 1/4 inch is going to be 3.5 inches on the, and then 28 plus 1.5 inches overhang, so it's a nice square. So that's 29.5 plus another 1/4 inch seam allowance on each end is going to be 30. So I'm going to make a rectangle that's 3.5 by 30. It feels a little bit strange that this is how I've had to set up the fabric. So as you can see, that only just fits there. And in order to make this happen, I folded it on this edge, and I folded it on this edge. But there's a gap here, and that is because I only have to cut one waistband. So I'm going to cut the main body of the skirt, and then out of the little leftover strip in the middle, I get to cut out the waistband. as it is this edge here that is going to be a seam, I'm just going to have to like slit between the two layers because there's no extra here. Which is fine, actually. I like it when there's no extra because that's less to throw away when you think about it. Since this is definitely like polyester spandex, it has to go landfill, unfortunately. There's not really much I can do with tiny scraps of polyester spandex. Hi, Molly. What's up, kitty butt? So yeah, maximizing fabric usage so that less goes to the landfill. That's one way to make your sewing hobby more environmentally friendly. Apparently it's time for the maintenance groundskeeper to cut the lawn. As you can see right here, the pieces butt up right to each other, and I'm just gonna like slice between them. That is not wrong at all. Just saying. That is maximizing the usage of the fabric. And I just actually happened to get really lucky that this all fits on here. I didn't like go back and make things smaller or whatever to make them fit. I just actually literally got lucky. So let's cut it out. Before I sew anything, I am marking the darts with tailor's tacks. One of the first steps is always to sew the darts. So I'm going to do that. Don't forget to press. I serged the edges of every vertical seam before sewing them. This is the zipper in question. However, I am going to start the centered zipper by stitching the lower part of the left side seam together, the part that is not included in the zipper. I'm going to measure the zipper up against the pieces, and I'm going to put a pin here where the zipper stops. And I'm going to sew shut below that. You'll recall that I made the seam allowance on the side seams a 1/2 inch, which is like annoyingly between the 10 millimeter and 15 millimeter on my seam gauge here, because I have a metric machine. Since I have such a small seam allowance on most of my seams, serging is kind of necessary for this project. Even when we try our best, sometimes our patterns aren't quite perfect. And what matters most is that the top area is spot on. Whereas if the hems don't quite line up, that's okay. You just make it a little bit shorter. There is one caveat to this. Please do make sure that you have everything else lined up. Otherwise, that is probably why your hems don't line up. Now I have the zipper lined up. I have the zipper opened, by the way. Okay, I have it lined up. I actually extended the tape just past the seam allowance at the top of the skirt because it's going to get tucked into the waistband, and also I don't have a large amount of seam allowance up there. So having this all the way down here would mean there's a little bit of gap between where the zipper stops and where the waistband begins. And I don't really want that. So make sure it's all the way up there. And I'm going to stitch this down. I am not stitching too close to the zipper teeth because I don't want to interfere with the function of the zipper. And since I'm working with a fabric that has a fair amount of spandex in it, I have got to make sure that the fabric isn't stretching underneath the zipper while I'm sewing it. Because if it did so, it would get ripply. Or if I stretched one side more than the other, it would be really funny looking, and then I'd have like a bubble somewhere and it would just be a problem, so don't do that. And I'm gonna stitch this basically as far as I can get down until I meet my other seam. And back tack just a little bit. And do the same thing on the other side. This time I have it shut so that I can better line up the two sides of the fabric. I find it helpful to hold it taut a little bit. Which is to say, I'm pulling a little bit here, but I'm also pulling here. And unfortunately, this does sometimes mean that I have to, like, push and pull with both hands in order to make sure that the fabric doesn't slide around underneath. I know, it sounds crazy, but it's what it is. And as I get closer to the top, I have to undo the zipper just a little bit so that I can sew past the zipper pull. So of course, this is what it looks like now. When I pull on it, I can see the zipper tape, and since we don't really want that, what I'm going to do is press and sew. I'll pin if I need to. This area. What I mean is press it so that it's nice and flat here, and then I'm going to stitch a box around it. If you find that your fabric is particularly difficult to work with, you can baste this shut before sewing the zipper in, but I don't usually do that because I just don't usually work with fabrics that are super wild and hard to work with, because why would I do that? Okay, so I moved the foot so that the needle is on the right side now, and I'm gonna not move the needle in relation to that because I do need that space. So I can line up the edge of the foot with the zipper teeth, but the needle will be a little bit away from them because we don't want to, as I said, interfere with the functioning of the zipper. I have the zipper pull pulled down just a little bit in the beginning, just to make sure that I don't get any weird stitching because of it being in the way. But once I get a little bit past the top of the zipper, I will move it back up there. You may notice, if my lighting is good enough, that my fabric is brown and my zipper is black. There's nothing wrong with that. Actually, when I'm looking at it in the camera, my fabric looks kind of like reddish orangish. It's actually like a dark brown with like flecks of tan. Back to the zippering. What I'm doing now is I'm just holding down the fabric so that it's like just over the zipper tape. Or, sorry, the zipper teeth, just over the zipper teeth. Stitching it will pull it just a little bit to the side, and having it just covering completely the zipper teeth, I find is usually enough of a buffer so that when it's sewn, it's right in the middle of the teeth. And as we are approaching the bottom, remember where the zipper stop is, because we do not want to sew through that. You'll break your needle. You might even break your machine. Just don't do it. We are going to put the needle down and pivot. And stitch a few stitches across the bottom. It's okay to pick up the foot and reposition the fabric if you need to. Make sure that you have done enough stitches to make, well, to make it so that it's symmetrical on the other side. And stitch back up to the top. And do just like 1 or 2 back tack stitches within the seam allowance at the top. course, press. Therefore, we are going to pin the pleat as such. Just so we're clear, this is the pleat with the seam allowance that I'm pinning. Do this on every pleat edge. I'm not too concerned about the seam allowance up here. I'm concerned with the pleat. And of course, after you pin it, press it. This will give it the nice crispy edge. I have taken out the pins because I don't need them at this point. And I'm going to stitch above the pleat, back tacking a little bit. Do recall that my seam allowance here is only 1/4 of an inch, which is not a whole lot, but I literally maximized the fabric. Like, you know, my pieces were basically touching each other, so I really couldn't do any more than that. And I'm going to sew all the way down this section until I get to the pleats. When I get there, I'm going to continue on this pressed stitching line for about an inch or so. I do recommend that you measure to make sure that like your 2 front pleats and your 2 back pleats are identical. It would be funny looking if you had them, you know, crooked or mismatched or whatever. But do a couple of back tack stitches here, pull it off, take out the rest of the pins, and then seam allowance here is also 1/4, and we're going to sew here. I am not at all concerned about sewing this little edge up here where the seam allowances don't touch. And I'm not at all concerned about sewing that shut. And the reason is, obviously, no one is going to be looking up there because it's like, you know, sewn down here and then sewn from up there. And if you were to sew it shut flat, you would end up with not a box pleat, which is the kind of pleat that I'm going for today, is a box pleat. What are you talking about, Molly? And I'm just gonna go all the way down the seam. All the way down. Till we get to the bottom. When I open it up, these are, of course, the creases here, and I could stick my finger up there. This is where the stitching line ends and then where the pleat begins. Something that I'm going to do in an effort to make my pleat extra nice is I'm going to pull it apart right here. And I'm going to make sure that the stitching here is directly on top of the stitching that is currently on the outside. And I'm going to put a pin in either side of it. Then I flip it over, and just before where the pleat is here, I'm going to do just a couple of stitches in the ditch. I have no problem back tagging here because they're in the ditch, so it's quite unlikely that they're going to be seen. Yep, can't see them at all. Pull this out, take out the pins, and that just helps secure the pleat. Oh, I better cut this thread off. But yeah. I have stitched in the ditch, just to help secure this pleat. And of course, I'm going to do all of my pleats, just like that. I am also, of course, sewing the side seam. I think it is easiest to do that one last. Do all the pleat seams first. Of course, always a good idea to try it on. I haven't put the waistband on yet. Here's my zipper. But yeah, haven't put the waistband on yet because I wanted to try it on first. Probably end up doing the waistband tomorrow. I think it's gonna rain tomorrow, so I probably won't do activity tomorrow. Blah 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 blah. Yeah. So, what the back looks like so far. I can't actually see the back of my skirt because I don't have eyes back there. I'll look at it when I'm done filming it. I pinned, cut, and attached the interfacing, and now I'm going to sew the seams. Yeah, so I have this side flipped up so that later when I go to stitch it underneath, it's easier for me to do that. And I'm going to do both ends. And make sure that you flip up the same side. Got the waistband turned right side out, and the edge that's not flipped over, I'm going to pin that to the outside of the top of the skirt. Sometimes I pin it to the outside if I want to not have a lot of stitching visible on the outside of the skirt. Whereas if I was definitely going to do some top stitching, I would pin it to the inside so that the top stitching would hold it in place on the outside, and it would just be both functional and design. Whereas this time, what I'm going to do is stitch it to the outside, and then flip it right side up, and then stitch in the ditch. I have a lot of pins in here because I want to make sure that everything sits down nicely. This is where like the darts and the seams are, and I want to make sure that those sit down nice and flat. But I also want to sew with the less stretchy piece on top because I find it easier to do it that way if you're working with two pieces that are different stretchinesses, and this piece is significantly less stretchy now because it's got the interfacing on it, whereas this piece is very stretchy because it's fabric that's got a lot of spandex in it. And what I'm saying is I sew it with a less stretchy piece on top because I find it easier to make sure that nothing gets stretched out while it's being sewn, because the feed dogs are doing a pretty good job of pulling this through. Whereas if it was on top, sometimes it like gets pushed and bunched and just not a good time. So I'm gonna sew this on now. I pressed, and now I'm going to pin up the folded. I'm going to fold this edge up like we had folded up the end when we stitched it shut, and I'm going to pin it in place on the inside. But I'm going to make sure that my overhang hangs just below the stitching line, which is pretty easy to see here because it's there. We can see it. Just below the stitching line so that when I stitch in the ditch later, I make sure that I'm capturing this edge. Now I'm stitching in the ditch. I am not taking the pins out. I am very carefully walking the machine over them, and the reason is that if there's a little piece that's not caught in the stitching, I don't want that to like unfold and do stuff. So I will take the pins out later and check, and if there is something that is stuck outside of the stitching, then I will just tack it back in. That's the plan. Slow and steady wins the race in this case. Going too fast leads to doing it badly. I'm just gonna tack shut that last little bit of the waistband that's overhanging. I have marked with pins where I'm going to put the buttonhole. I am using the buttonhole as a guide for where to put the button. I am not sewing the two pieces together. I'm not sewing it shut. I've got some vintage bias tape, and I'm going to sew it on and use it like a hem tape. Definitely gotta get some like footage of me like talking about the skirt. Maybe like in front of the porta-johns over there.
Good, because I gotta use it. Hopefully they're not locked like they were in Wisconsin.
I don't need my head in this shot either. I'm just gonna like bend over to talk about it, but that's what I gotta say about that. So if you could like come and zoom in here, and we will talk about these are my pleats, as you can see, and here's the hem.
Let's let me get over here and have a better look at those pleats. Oh, okay, we'll look in the shadows.
Here's the closure. Got my button, my zipper. my Library-Core pantyhose.
I think the only thing that I would do differently, if I could, I would make the pleats deeper.
Oh yeah, so as I was saying, this is the hem tape, and I did that cool blind hem stitch with that. Yeah, so blind hem here. Now that I've discovered the blind hem, I love it. I don't want to do anything else. Blind hem everything. And back. It's probably a little too much. And that's what I got to say about that, I guess. Look at these eyes. It's like surprisingly warm for October today. I love it. I love it. I love it.
The secret to walking in stilettos in grass is that I just never put pressure on my heel. It's like I'm walking on my tiptoes.
What book do I have in my bag today? The White Earth. Is it good? So far, it's kind of, I don't want to say sad exactly, but there's definitely racism in it. I don't want to spoil it.